Okay, welcome to the heart. This is going to be kind of an overview of the heart itself, not so much an explanation of the lab. I'm assuming you all know kind of how the lab works by now. What I want to do is take you through the lab guide and just provide some explanation and highlight some things along the way. I did include some description down here, which I'll also reference when we go through the heart. But the important functions are listed here, and I have some information about the ECG as well. So I'm going to go, again, I'm going to use the lab guide, but I'm using the Word file because the Word file is easier for me to annotate as we go through. So for the objectives, we are determining functions or identifying anatomical areas and structures in the heart. I will say, if I don't, in this screencast or looking at what's written in Canvas, if I don't give you a specific function for something, you don't need to worry about the function of it. The Canvas does point out what I have typed in the lab page, specific answers for how to identify the location of the AV and semilunar valves, or atrioventricular and semilunar valves. Let's see, and we are going to do the coronary circulation. We're going to do the sheep heart. We're going to do, I can't speak today, heart tissue, although probably won't show up on the exam because there aren't that many slides, but maybe the heart will be mixed in with other endocrine tissues or something, I don't know. Moving right along, we only have so much time to get these recordings done. The intrinsic conduction system, again, with that, all we're worried about is where it's located, and we're not worrying about interpreting the ECG at all. So that's going to live completely in lecture. So I just want to give you my quick, brief understanding of how I understand the heart, or how I like to explain the heart. So I like to start in the systemic circulation, and really the role of the heart is to take the blood from the systemic circulation, which is going to be deoxygenated, and then send it to the lungs where it is oxygenated. So this part right, where is my cursor? This right here and this right here represents your systemic circulation in your head and the rest of your body. So deoxygenated blood is coming back to the right side of the heart from superior and inferior vena cava. So as we're doing this, we want to define some terms here. So these these blood vessels that are carrying blood toward the heart are called veins. So you want to know that a vein is anything that carries blood toward the heart. Veins we're used to thinking of as being blue because they generally carry deoxygenated blood toward the heart. So now we've got this deoxygenated blood that's been brought back to the heart through all of these veins. Now it has to go out to both of the lungs. So here we have deoxygenated blood flowing away from the heart. So if it's going away from the heart, that's an artery. So here and here, those two blue blood vessels are your pulmonary arteries. They're arteries because they're carrying the blood away from the heart, but they're colored blue because it's deoxygenated blood. Then, and I might want to just erase a little bit in here, will it let me? There we go. So now our blood is in the heart, and in the lungs, and it's getting oxygenated. Now it's going to be sent from the lungs back to the left side of the heart. So it's going towards the heart. Now it's in a vein, but it's oxygenated. So right here, your pulmonary veins are all going to be red. And then also, if you just look at the picture there, it illustrates the fact that the left side of the heart here deals with deoxygenated blood, and the right side of the heart deals with oxygenated blood. And that's one of your functions. Whether it's an atrium up here or a ventricle down here, atria, ventricle. Right side of the heart, deoxygenated. Left side of the heart, oxygenated. So then we've got that from there. We will then, what I like to do to understand how the heart works is to trace the flow of blood through the heart. I'm going to try and do this relatively quickly without going crazy, and especially because this figure here does not have, here, this one has all of the structures that we want to know. And what's a good color? We're just going to do black for the blood, right? So blood is going to come superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, into the right side of the heart, and then into your pulmonary veins, which are going to carry it all to the left side of the heart. So blood enters the two atria, and then just by gravity flow goes down into your two ventricles like that. Then both of your ventricles are going to contract and push the blood. You want your blood to go from this ventricle up into pulmonary trunk there, and from this ventricle up into aorta there. So now we can start. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought this gave me the ability to just get rid of everything I had drawn. All right, so now our blood is here, and I need to practice this. Where's our blood? Our blood is here, and our blood is there. All right, ventricles squeeze. We want the blood to end up here and here. So what's going to happen is this valve here and this valve here are going to slam shut so that the blood can't flow back up into the two atria. So those are your two atrioventricular valves. Left side of the heart, bicuspid valve. Right side of the heart, tricuspid valve. So when we ask you where they're located, we're not going to ask you their function, we're going to ask you where they're located. You want to put them in between the two chambers because they're preventing flow from the ventricle back into the atria. So the tricuspid is going to be located between the right atrium and right ventricle, and the bicuspid is going to be located between the left atrium and the left ventricle. And so other things just to point out while we're here so that things make sense. This is what your two valves look like. You'll notice that the valves have little stringy bits hanging off of them there. Those are called the chordae tendineae. They're labeled over here. So you do have heartstrings. They are your chordae tendineae. You don't have to worry about their function, but what they do is anchor the valves to the inside of the ventricles so that they don't get blown up into the atria. Like imagine if you had a sail that wasn't properly secured, instead of catching the wind, it would just flop around. The chordae tendineae properly secure the valves so they catch the blood instead of just flapping around. What they secure themselves to are the papillary muscles. Again, we're not going to ask you the function of the papillary muscles, you just want to be able to identify one when you see them, and they anchor the chordae tendineae to the ventricular walls. Now there is other muscular texture or muscular structures in the ventricles. Those are called your trabeculae carni. And basically you just need to know it is the texture of muscle that you see when you look at the walls of the ventricles. So if we ask you to identify something on the inside of a ventricle and it's not a valve or a papillary muscle, it's the trabeculae carni. Also, don't forget then that you have this interventricular septum separating your two ventricles. It is a great, big, obvious, easy to see structure, but students sometimes forget to study it, and then they draw a blank when that shows up on the exam. I think we've talked about all of that. Oh, one thing I forgot to point out, and this figure doesn't show it at all, but in your, what's the word I'm looking for? In your atria, there is a texture to the muscles here in your atrial walls, and this drawing isn't showing up very well. But that's what it looks like. It looks like a little fringe. Those are your pectinate muscles, so just don't forget that the pectinate muscles exist, even though they're not listed on this figure here. They are in your long list of things to know. So trabeculae carnate in the ventricles, pectinate muscles in the atria. So with our blood, we were just talking about how the ventricles are going to contract and send the blood up into the aorta and the pulmonary trunk. When your ventricles relax, the blood wants to flow back down into the atria because it's a low pressure zone in the atria, and gravity is just dragging it that way. You have two semilunar valves, one at the base of the pulmonary trunk and this one here, which is actually connected to the aorta over here, so it's going to go, right, it makes that connection there. Those close when the blood starts to flow back down this way, and the blood gets caught in those two valves. So if we ask you where the pulmonary valve is located or where the aorta is located, you say it's located in between the blood vessel and the ventricle that it's separating. So pulmonary valve between pulmonary trunk and right ventricle, aortic valve between aorta and left ventricle. So just keep that in mind. Let me just check and make sure I've gone over all your stuff. Right, so we've done all of this and that, and we've identified all of these veins and the valves. Now we need to talk briefly about the coronary circulation. This is part of your systemic circulation, and what you need to know is that, right, a lot of blood is going to flow through the heart like they have it here, but the blood flows through pretty quickly. So there isn't a lot of time for gas exchange between the blood that's in the heart and the blood that's flowing through it. Plus, there isn't a lot of surface area, which means gas exchange would be highly inefficient, and the entire right side of your heart is carrying deoxygenated blood. So your heart doesn't get any oxygen from the blood that it's pumping. It needs its own systemic circulation, which is going to branch off of the aorta and supply the heart with oxygenated blood. And I'm going in the wrong direction. That is where your coronary circulation comes in. First thing to know is that on all of our models and all of the pictures that we have, the left coronary artery is hidden behind either the pulmonary trunk or this part of the left atrium. So you are never going to see the left coronary artery. As soon as it sticks its head out from underneath the left atrium, it immediately splits into the anterior interventricular artery and the circumflex artery. So everything that you'll be able to see on the models from here to there, and it goes all the way around the back of the heart, that's all circumflex. And then on the right side, you can see the right coronary artery. And then we are going to say anything that branches off of that right coronary artery is a marginal artery. This is because I can't tell you which one is the marginal artery, because none of the diagrams and none of the models look the same. So there's no way to point at one and look at the other and know what anybody's talking about. So we're always going to know where the right coronary artery is, and the marginal artery is going to be anything coming off of it. Then we get to the back of the heart. From the back, you can still see the circumflex, although they don't show it here. but the circumflex artery would be flowing right around this way. Then on the back, you are going to have your posterior interventricular artery. It's just going to be the big red thing on the back. And the only venous structure on the whole heart you need to be able to identify is right there. That's the coronary sinus. And one thing you might want to know about the coronary sinus is that it dumps the blood into the right atrium, right? Because this is systemic blood. It is deoxygenated blood from your systemic circulation. It's going to go back into the right atrium with the rest of the systemic blood from your circulation. And I think that's about everything you need to know. We went through all of this, all of that, talked about the coronary circulation, cardiac muscle, just know the slide when you see it. That dissection, you have a whole bunch of material from Carolina to look through. And again, just with this, just know where everything is located. And then everything that you know from lecture, you'll already know anyways, because lecture goes over this in a little bit more detail, and this stuff don't worry about. So your lab guide is here. Click on that to get to the dissection. These two files down here just contain pictures of the heart for you to use to study from. You should look at them because there are pictures in here that are not necessarily on your worksheet. We have multiple models, and I didn't put all of the models in the worksheet. So make sure you look at all of the pictures in there because it gives multiple views of the heart, which may show up on the lab exam. I think that's it. Let me know if there are any questions.